I am Miley Blocks, and we are at Vicky's Fabrics in Kapa'a, Hawaii. Welcome to our Pick a Petal, oh my gosh, Miley is crazy, and sewing this whole thing by machine series. This is video number 3. If you haven't seen 1 and 2, you want to go check them out on youtube.com. Our channel is Vicky's Fabrics. And we'd love to see you there. Like, subscribe, and check out all our other videos. We have a really fun series of videos, both instructional and informational, on our YouTube channel. But let's talk today about block number 3 of Pick a Petal. There are actually 5 pieces to the block this month. I haven't put the center square in there because it's just a 2.5-inch square, and I was just cutting 2.5-inch squares. But let's go ahead and talk about I, J, K, and L. If you are cutting directly with the templates as opposed to tracing and cutting them out, I tend to go and make rectangles and squares that fit the size of the templates, and then do my fine cutting with the Olfa. This is a 28mm rotary cutter. The smaller blade helps you work the curves on the templates better. Okay, and you're going to see that as I cut this last piece. If you've seen my other 2 videos, I like to take the outer piece and cut it bigger than necessary, right? So this piece, this is your template K, it looks really big, and I'm going to show you why. I have cut 2 pieces, and they are 10.5 inches by 3 inches. And what I can do with this 10.5 by 3 is have template K with about a 1/4 inch gap on this side that I can cut about 1/2 inch on either side. So I'm going to come here, cut 1/2 inch, and then I'm going to cut along these curves. Okay. And really, I only do 2 layers at a time, so I get very exact cuts. Let's see if that happened. Yep. So that's 2 pieces here, and then I'm going to take this, turn it over, and then I can slide my piece here, again a little bit extra on either side, slide it up so I have a little bit of room there, about a 1/4 inch, and then I can cut this other end and have very little waste as I cut the 4 pieces for the outside edge. Okay, so a little bit of room on the edge on both of these pieces, using my small rotary cutter and getting both of those pieces out of 10.5 inches by 3. Okay, so it's a little trick there on the cutting. So I'm going to use this in a second later. Okay, so let's talk now about getting this piece really flat. This is a lot of curves on this, so when you put your I and J together, you just kind of line those up and sew those together. This is a very gentle curve, so I just pin across and sew. You can actually sew. Some people like to sew with the curve up, and some people like to sew with the curve down. When I sew these pieces together, I like to sew with the more stable piece down and the bigger piece on top. That just works better for me because I like to see this waffling happen on the top, so I know I'm not getting pinches in this seam. Okay, so you're going to see me when I start pinning some of the other pieces, and I'll show you how I sew. So This is the tricky part. Now we're getting to all the curves, okay? I have my outside piece and my petal piece here. I'm going to fold this in half, mark my center. I'm going to fold this in half, mark my center. I'm going to line that up, pin this together in the middle, and then I'm going to take the corner here and match this up, not so much that this is straight. If you cut it, it will be, but I am matching this curve. This is the angle that I want to keep when I start my sewing. Okay, so what I do with this is I'm going to actually pin across this curve to keep this stable when I start sewing. And I'm going to do the same thing on this side. Okay, this curve is what I want to keep together. And then from here, see how I said this is the floppy side? I'm going to encourage gently that piece of fabric to move to the bottom curve. If this folds, that's okay. This is my seam allowance. I'm actually way okay if I have a ripple like this, pinning it. I know I'm going to sew here and that ripple is not going to end up in my seam. Okay, I like to make sure that all this stuff, because as I am running this through my machine, I'm going to be manipulating this gently so that I'm not catching any of these ripples. Okay, I will be really honest. I have sewn a couple of these. Ooh, it's this one actually that I'm working on. When I sew, I generally start in the middle, go one direction, come back, start in the middle, and go the other direction. Okay? And then I'm going to turn around, and when I press, I'm pressing from the outside towards the center, and I'm making sure that these are flat. Okay, that they don't have a fold in them that wants to be even. You know, you want to maintain this curve by making sure that you press towards the center and you tend to get flatter curves there. Okay, so how do we now put on our petals? This was really hard too. What I found worked for me is I'm going to take these petals and I am actually going to mark my 4 dots. Now these 4 dots, when you mark them, are supposed to line up with these points here. Okay, so what I started doing was lining up these dots and then tried to manipulate the orange peel into this curve. This is actually a better method. What I've done is I've taken the orange peel and I've folded it in half. I've taken this curve, knowing that this dot is just a little less than 1/4 inch away from here. I'm going to take this point right here, a little less than 1/4 of an inch away from this seam, and I'm going to use that as a midpoint. See how I've lined up the curve? Now I'm going to lay the orange peel using that angle as the center. Make sure that I pin it on that angle. Now watch this. When I line this corner up with this corner here, and I pin it so it doesn't move, I pin across. When I ease this curve together, these dots naturally fall on the seams. Okay? And so I'm going to pin that right on the seam, and then here on the outside, now because this is longer, right, I cut a little extra on the edge. It's not going to line up properly if I use the point here. So I am just gently easing that in on the curve to the edge of that point there. So I still have this very flat, but this has got a pretty good curve that you're going to follow when you take this to your machine and sew this together. Okay, like I said, I like to sew with this side up and the flat side down. And when you do this, I press this side out already. When you open your angle, this is lined up properly. It's not pulling more to one side or the other because your center is proper. Okay, so when you iron this out, this piece alone becomes very flat. Okay, let me take this to the ironing board and I'll be right back. So we're back from the ironing board. I've used my iron a lot on this block. When I started doing these, oh my gosh, they were like valleys and mountains. It was so crazy. It was so crazy. I was almost crying. And I was using a lot of starch to get them flat. Once I started lining up the angles on the orange peels, it became a lot better. Mind you, it is still not perfect. You are still going to get waffles, but not nearly as bad as if you didn't angle that orange peel correctly. So again, I'm going to sit here. I know where my dots are. I'm going to match point to point when I mark my center of my orange peel. I'm going to do this on both sides. So now I know where my center is. I'm going to make an estimate just a little bit away from that point. I'm going to fold that in, mark my center. Do that again, fold that in, mark my center. Okay. And then when I lay this on here, the first thing I do is I'm going to pin these 2 points, because that's my center, right? And then I'm going to maneuver this line, this halfway angle, all the way till it lines up straight with that angle. You may have to wiggle it a little bit to where that point that you've marked lands on the seam, but the angle is what's important. And then you get to ease that piece into there with another pin. Okay, and then move over to the edges. Now, I still did do a lot of starching on the end after these were sewn. Just, you know, believe in starch. Starch is your friend on this piece. Okay, there's my angle, there's my angle. I'm going to shift it over till they're lined up. And then I want to note where my dots are on that orange peel. Pin that line. Match that curve. and then go ahead and move out. If you are comfortable sewing curves, you know, at this point, my gosh, there are so many curves. Tip and trick for that, drop your stitch length. I tend to sew curves with a 1.75 stitch length, so less than 2, because the feed dogs will pull kind of slower, so you have more time to manipulate. If you feel comfortable, you can start on one end and very carefully work your way all the way around this curve. Now, you're going to do this on both sides to get your number 3 block. So these have been starched. They are oversized, right? Because I have that little extra 1/4 inch-ish on each edge. I have a 8.5 inch by 8.5 inch. This is a Creative Grid square on square trim tool. And when I drop this on here for trimming, you're going to notice it's not perfect. It's okay. I am just really happy that this is done and starched and happy. Okay, so I'm going to get, you can see where my 1/4 inch is. These fell a little bit out of it. These are a little inside of it. I'm going to get as close as I can to where that is and trim that up to my 8.5 inch by 8.5 inch. One of the things I do recommend is kind of holding off on trimming them all until you're ready to put them together with the other blocks. Go ahead and leave them, you know, the ends scraggly, and as we see, they're doing a little bit of fraying, which is completely normal. But now I'm ready to take this with one of my trimmed month number 2 blocks, and then, oh, this one's not trimmed, but one of my trimmed number 2 blocks, of which I do have some, and sew them together. I know I trimmed some number 2s. Anyway, there it is. Okay, so you can see I've trimmed this up and it's a very clean edge, and now these are the same size, and you can start sewing them together and to your middle, and block, and month 1, 2, and 3 are done. Yay! See you guys next time for actually number 4, and probably a little bit of number 5, because number 4 is going to be some neutral log cabins and 5 is going to be some embroidery and applique.